feel that? That lightness in the air? No more celebrity baby teeth. Pretty good. Based on a week when Donald Trump only did events at properties he owned, we said he might be angling to be the first work-from-home president. All presidents, we were told by a lot of people, all presidents are from home because they live in the White House, beginning with John Adams. George Washington only worked from a boat. And he didn't have to, but he just liked standing because he would always get up in front and be like, you know what this reminds me of? And they're like, ugh. We had a joke about meth-laced candy discovered in New Zealand. Kiwis don't say candy, according to a New Zealand viewer. Kiwis don't say candy, they say lollies. So we should have said meth-laced lollies. But then I bet they don't say crystal meth either. I bet they say, like, Krizamizza. Wanna smizza some Krizamizza? You know, sometimes I wade into the comments. I can tell just based on the tone that I might be running up against somebody who disagrees with me politically. I don't know for sure, but I'm just guessing due to the timbre. Why are you always such a whiny little bitch? It's not always. We showed this picture of this hat I was wearing during the writer's strike of 2008 in Closer Look. And in the body of Closer Look, I said, I can't believe no one told me not to wear this. Quite famously, Mike Shoemaker told me not to wear this. Mike Shoemaker and I, we were on strike and we weren't hanging out together because we were working on SNL and that was where we hung out together. And we don't do well when we're apart. And during this picket line, CNN did interviews, and I did a television interview in that hat. And Shoemaker took a picture of it on his TV. And, you know, all jokes aside, Shoemaker's a pretty loving fella. And he sent me a picture of this, and he said, what the is wrong with you? I haven't worked this hard for your success to have you throw it away on this stupid hat. And again, emotions were running hot during the writer's strike, and he felt bad. And he called me up the next day and asked if he could come over to apologize. And he showed up at my apartment, and I'm very proud of this to this day. I answered the door in a full tuxedo. Because that's how seriously I was taking my appearance. Also, we were reading A Closer Look, and Sal wrote the line, why didn't someone tell me not to wear this hat? And when he read it, and I knew this was going to happen, when we read it out loud, I go, why didn't somebody tell me not to wear this hat? And from across the room, Shoemaker goes, somebody did. Hey, we always talk about how Trump says windmills cause cancer. People clarified, he thinks the sound of windmills causes cancer. And you might be wondering, how would the sound of windmills cause cancer? This is the sound of a windmill. Okay, and then I had Devin, who works with us, slow it down because you can actually, if you listen, you can hear how it might lead to cancer. Let's play that.
Smoke cigarettes. Smoke cigarettes.
We said grandfathers often have 2 feet deep computers, and then we showed a picture. People were upset because we didn't show a picture of a computer. We showed a picture of a monitor or a CRT, which is a cathode race theory. A lot of, in the comments sometimes, people will watch corrections and they'll say, oh, I could hear Amber laugh. She's never here, but you just heard her. She's here today and you just heard her. I said Trump was holding a container of tiny Tic Tacs. It was a tiny container of regular-sized Tic Tacs. Also, Tic Tacs is what people from New Zealand call their taxes. Gotta fizz up my Tic Tacs. And because New Zealand is in the southern hemisphere, everything is backwards. So they don't file on April 15th, they file on April 51st. Dunkin' Donuts is just Dunkin' now. I know that, but I'm not switching. I grew up in New England, that's just baked into me. It's like when the NHL said everybody's got to start wearing helmets, but if you hadn't worn a helmet, you were allowed to just grandfather in. That's the way I feel like New England people feel about it. We're not gonna just switch it to Dunkin's because you ask. Somebody said, hey, how does Sal feel about sharing the honor of throwing out a first pitch at a Mets game with the Hawk Tua girl? And I would say it's immaterial how he feels because the rest of us feel pretty good about it. Pretty good about it. So let's see, Sal, you write 3 closer looks a week. You've been doing it for like 8 years. This gal said one thing on the street. It was a real horse head in The Godfather. I said it wasn't. A lot of you confirmed it was a real horse head in The Godfather. But before you get angry, the horse was not killed for the purposes of the movie. And in fact, as soon as the scene was over, they just put it right back on the neck. Sent him on his way. Talked about, this is the scariest thing that happens in corrections, which is this. We talked about Data and Star Trek. And I said something here. This is not the scary part. It says, correction. It was not an episode of Star Trek that Data went underwater. It was the Insurrection movie. So that's all nice. Here's the scary part. 51 replies. Unsubscribe. I was told it was not pronounced bestiality, it's pronounced bestiality. Though take that with a grain of salt, as they then added, it's easy to remember because that's the best kind of sex. We had a graphic of Donald Trump playing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Got a comment about that. Trump wouldn't play that version of Breath of the Wild. Judging from the PEGI, Pan-European Game Information, rating in the lower left, that's the PAL for Europe version. He'd be playing the NTSC version, which should have an ESRB rating in the lower left. Oh, you're right. We talked about empty seats at Trump rallies and mentioned some long list of ghostly type characters. I was told that ghouls and goblins are not invisible, which means you are not a goblin. We switched it. A lot of you said it should have been mustards with an E. And then this was a pitch, too. The expression is phone it in, not mail it in, like I said. But if you're using a Samsung, maybe mail it in, too. Just play it safe. As somebody said, can you stop that one guy from laughing? Look, guys. That's Buck, and as we have established, if he stops laughing, we all die. I basically intimated that we are all living in a timeline that is the creation of Buck's imagination. And someone wrote in something that I don't know, we're 110 episodes in on this, I don't know if it'll ever be beaten. As far as I gasped when I read it. Somebody wrote, if Buck is responsible for this timeline, I think Harambe would like a few words. Harambe, the Cincinnati Zoo's gorilla that was shot and killed in 2016. I said Buck was responsible for this timeline, and one of you thought, oh, really? So Harambe's on him? We've gone through this before. There's no such thing as seagulls. Somebody said there's no such thing as seagulls. There's only gulls that live by the sea. Well, I wish we could come up with a cool name for them. I also spoke as a shark. I was speaking English, so obviously I knew it wasn't real. One of you pointed out, interesting, that sharks actually don't make noise at all and can only communicate via gestures. Open their jaws, move their heads and stuff. And, we'll count it. We were looking for a third animal flub. Get back to the classics. But, one of the things was that one of our flubs last week we talked about was putting a black bear in the overhead compartment of a plane because of the RFK Jr. story, and it was a brown bear. And there's a lot to unpack in the RFK Jr. story. I don't know if you know the full breadth of it, but he was driving, saw a dead bear cub in the middle of the road, and, as one would do when they luck into, a bit of bounty like that, threw it in the trunk of his car. And then he had a dinner at Peter Luger's Steakhouse. And then he forgot that he had a flight. Who among us? This isn't a story of judgment. This is a story of empathy. And then, he decided the best path forward, maybe the only path forward, really, given his conundrum, was to put the bear in Central Park and fake like a bike had hit it and killed it. Now you might say, yeah, but you would need a bike for that. Well, it just so happens he was also lucky enough, his words, he had an old bike in his car that someone had asked him to throw away. And, I do think it speaks to how interesting your life is when the old bike in the car is like the seventh most suspicious thing about this story. His car is like Mary Poppins' carpet bag if it was full of nightmares. The reason I'm getting into all of this is someone asked me if I consider his staged bear accident an animal flub. Yes. By any metric, that is an animal flub on a far grander scale than we flub. But, I use this segment of corrections to address errors in our graphics and our nomenclature. So, just preparing you for that. It's time for animal flubs.
Animal flubs. Animal flubs.
Let me explain.
Let him explain.
I had a bear in my trunk and I was late to catch my plane.
Catching a plane.
Not to mention I got this worm around in my brain.
Let him explain.
I swear to one and all that I am completely sane.
Leave him alone. Oh, what? I ruined it? F you guys.
I wanted that song to be the last thing I ever asked Eli to do so that he would be less sad about leaving. There are days when you're sad and days when you're grateful, and there are some where they're both. And I think the best course of action is to lean into grateful. And that's what I'm trying to do today. It makes it a lot easier to be with everyone here. I think poetry exists to help express feelings that you're having that you can't put the words to. And it is the gift of poets that they pass down things for generations. And then when you're feeling hopeless or depressed, you find these words. And so I would just like to quote MacGruber, who once said, well, they were great guys, and this is a ass day. I got a very nice gift from Sid. This is the band. As Legos, not today. And they're gonna have a permanent home here. It's not the same, but it's pretty special. And obviously, not room for Wally anymore. It's just real estate. It's not personal, it's real estate. Yeah. If you know, you know. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going on hiatus starting Monday, and I know you're mad, but I can explain. We worked the last 2 weeks, and I'm so tired. All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks.